Thanks for having me again. I'm sure some of you that have been here many times are getting pretty tired of hearing me yammer. I know I get pretty tired of hearing me yammer sometimes too. But here we are again. And of course, the times are always changing. There's always something new to say in there. I think we need to start with something that's pretty basic, and that's that this country is an idea. It started as an idea. It started as an idea that was formed in the minds of men and women. And it's an idea that's a couple of hundred years old. In fact, it's an idea really that's a couple of thousand years old when you get right down to it. Proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all the inhabitants therein. That was the first time that phrase was ever uttered. And it was an important phrase, and it means something. It means something to us now. But it didn't always mean something to rulers and to countries that were in existence then and throughout the ages. Because I better not do that anymore. In fact, there are three kinds of countries. There is a country that was formed by people who all look alike, think alike, and act alike, and they naturally devolve to a leader. And those countries are typically pretty pacifistic, not always though. Japan's case they weren't, but in the case of the communist Chinese they weren't. But most of the time the government's pretty easy there because everybody looks alike, they think alike, they act alike, they believe alike, they know like things. And it isn't too difficult to govern those kind of people. Now sometimes that population can be used to oppress and tyrannize other people, as in the case of Japan and communist China and Germany and so on. The other kind of country is a country that's made up of different tribes. And that's found mostly throughout Africa and Middle Europe, Eastern Europe. Those tribes are very disparate groups of people, and they think very differently. But somehow one tribe dominates, at least in the Congo and the Democratic People's Republic of Congo and in Zaire and Namibia and other places I've been, socialist pest holes all over the world. These tribes develop, and then one tribe develops more strength than the rest of them. And that tribe will typically have someone who rises to the top as a leader. And then that leader can use the dominant tribe to tyrannize, subjugate, murder, slaughter, torture, and enslave the other tribes, and he calls that a country. Idi Amin is a good example of that. Robert Mugabe is another example of it. In a sense, Fidel Castro is an example of that, because quite frankly, the Cubans were settlers just like we are. And there were a lot of differences in Cuba. But Castro used his power and his might and his torturing, murdering friend Che Guevara. I always laugh when I see people like Spike Lee wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt. Or I see young people at Berkeley wearing Che Guevara t-shirts. The guy was a mass murderer. He was a torturer. He was a pedophile. I mean, but anyway, those who do not learn their history are condemned to repeat the same mistakes. And you know, we say that those who don't know history are doomed to repeat. It's not really true. History is always repeating itself. Why? Because human nature never changes. Human beings have always been the same. We are sinful by nature. We make the same mistakes again and again and again. But by ignoring our history, we ignore the opportunity to succeed the next time where generations before us have failed. And that's what we hope to avoid here. We hope to avoid that failure because we want to learn the history of this nation and how it was built and what the founding principles are, and we want to adhere to those principles. Why? Because they work. That's why. Because they worked. They worked for hundreds of years. It wasn't perfect. They didn't always work for everybody, but they worked for a lot of people. And as generations passed, they worked for more and more people. And as that check that Thomas Jefferson wrote, and this is what Martin Luther King said, he said that the Constitution was a check that was written, or excuse me, the Declaration of Independence was a check that was written by Thomas Jefferson. And it wasn't cashed right away, but the foundation was there. And eventually it was cashed. And for some people it came in the 1960s, but it came. Liberty came for everybody. So then we come to the third kind of country, and that's the country that's born as an idea. And it's born in people's minds and in their hearts. And it's born as an idea that all people will share in. And that idea is liberty. And someone here in this very room asked me one time, because he got tired of hearing the word, there you are, liberty, 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 yeah, you know who you are. liberty, schmibberty, what does that mean? And I thought about that, and I thought, I can conceptualize that in my mind. It's easy. I've read thousands of documents and hundreds of books, and I know what that means in my heart, but what does it mean if you say that to a business owner? What does it mean if you say it to a garbage truck driver? What does it mean when you say that to a guy and you're trying to express how important the Second Amendment is to you, but this guy doesn't even own a gun, couldn't care less about it? What is that liberty? And so I kind of thought about that and literally, this is how dumb I am, it took me months to come up with this. Liberty is the insurance policy. That means government can't take your stuff. They can never come and take your stuff. Whether you're the minority or the majority, and believe me, I think what young people are missing today is that pendulum is constantly moving. I mean, one day the minority is of a certain color. 20 years from then, the minority is of a certain religion. 100 years from then, it's people who like to possess firearms. 50 years from then, it'll be Christians. 40 years from then, it'll be someone else. But the people who are in the minority, that pendulum is constantly moving. But here's the beauty of the system that was created in the minds of the men and women of the United States of America. The majority, no matter who they are, can never come and take the minority's stuff. What do I mean by stuff? Their life, their freedom, their liberty, or their property. Those things are protected from the majority always and forever. And in fact, they're above government. They're not policy decisions government has any right to make or any jurisdiction to make. Jurisdiction is very important here because we live in a society that we hope has what? Rule of law. And there's rule of law, and there's rule by law. And Plato and Aristotle had a big argument about that. In fact, the term aristocracy came from Aristotle, because Aristotle thought that there should be a governing elite. And by the way, Woodrow Wilson, one of the first progressive presidents, believed exactly the same thing, that there should be a ruling elite, there should be a technical class of bureaucrats beneath the ruling elite. The top two tiers should be protected from certain laws and certain regulations. They should not have to abide by those. And they should be trained well in order to govern the rest of you. Because the bulk of you will not be in Class A or B. The bulk of you will be in Class C. And that's what rule by law means. That's what Aristotle meant. And in ancient Greece, in parts of Greece, they had that. They had a ruling elite who were exempt from laws and rules. They could literally murder people with impunity. And then there were the bulk of the people, and the laws were used to govern them. That's rule by law. Rule of law, Plato, the great equalizer. All men and women will be judged equally for the same crime, and the same penalties apply to each, no matter their station, no matter their wealth, no matter their class, no matter what. That's rule of law. That is the ideal upon which this nation was founded. That is the idea that was formed in the hearts of men and women. And I can prove that. Don't ever accept anything that you hear at these meetings as gospel. Check it out. Ask questions. Probe. I can prove this with 1,000 documents, 1,000 letters, 1,000 speeches. I can prove it right here with stuff in front of me, stuff I can get on my computer, and if I can't find it there, I can mail the court case to you later. So everything I'm saying here, I can prove to you. And that's important, because what we talk about here and what we strive to achieve here is nothing less than truth. And when you know the truth will set you free. And that's what we want. We want to regain liberty because in the state of California, we have rule by law. I can prove that too. I can prove that very easily. In 2011, the California legislature exempted itself from the show cause laws that you have to obey prior to obtaining a concealed carry permit. Those people do not have to obey those laws. Those laws were created to control you. And the people who rule over you don't have to follow those rules. They just walk in and say, give me one. Now, I don't care whether you want a concealed carry permit or not. That's irrelevant to me. That isn't the point. The point is the legislature can and does routinely exempt itself from provisions which subjugate you. Kevin De Leon does not drive a Chevy Volt. Kevin De Leon does not care how much gasoline costs. He drives a Chevy Suburban, and so do his armed bodyguards. And by the way, his armed bodyguards have assault-style weapons, which you are prohibited from purchasing. So he is entitled to a level of protection which you are not entitled to. He is exempt from the laws that subjugate and govern you, that rule you. And in fact, he said that half of his family's here illegally, and that some of them stole their identities from law-abiding citizens of the state of California and the United States. But that's okay, Kevin says, because that's what it takes to get by here. I'm sorry, if I use that defense in a bank robbery, I don't think the judge would allow it. I mean, no, Your Honor, I didn't rob the bank, I'm just driving the car, and after all, that is what it takes to get by here. And if the people who rule over me can commit crimes with impunity, why can't I? Don't we have rule of law? Aren't I entitled to equal protection under those laws, or equal exemption from the laws, right? I mean, if all men are created equal, right? No, that's not how it works. But that's what we're fighting to achieve. And quite frankly, I personally will settle for nothing less. You know, first of all, you're probably wondering, if you have any sense you are, who the heck are you? I mean, who is this guy, and what gives you the license to stand in front of us and talk this way? And I would like to give you my resume. I'm a Christian. I'm a husband. I'm a father. Pretty much it. I'm not a governor. I've never governed anybody or anything. I'm not a particularly well-educated person, except in the things I'm educated in. And that's mostly flying stuff and fighting stuff and cop stuff and, you know, things that most people don't even care about. But one thing all of this has forced me to be, and that's a thinker and a reader. And I did walk through my life asleep. You know, Patrick Henry said, I have not but the light of experience with which to guide my feet. I don't know the future except by what's past. And as I pass through my life with my eyes closed and my hands out, taking stuff, you know, a good life, a good job, money, stuff for my house, cars, you know, planes, boats, whatever everybody wants. Another horse, got to have another horse, right? A newer tractor. I mean, as I walked through my life, I realized that the situation that I was living in was degrading. And one thing I've learned in an airplane, if things are going to hell in the airplane, you better do something about it, because there's kind of a time limit on that, right? You know, and you can only get away with keeping your eyes closed and ignoring the obvious for so long before something really, really bad starts to happen. And I've been there too. And then also, flying around the world, I noticed some things. I noticed some things about where we are and where I was. I've been to 6 wars with the United States government, flying in support of the United States military. The details of that are irrelevant and not very important anyway, and I didn't do anything that millions of other people have done and done better than me. And tens of thousands of them died doing it. But what I did notice is people from the United States of America do things with a purpose, and that purpose is to help people regain their liberty and regain their knowledge of liberty and regain a station in life that is due all human beings. We're all entitled to these things. And in fact, I want to support the notion that our country was created on an idea, because we hold certain truths to be self-evident. Now, those are ideas that were given to us. These aren't original ideas, by the way. We didn't think this stuff up. Some of it came from the Mayflower Compact. Some of it came from the Magna Carta. Some of it came from Marcus Cicero. Some of it came from the Bible. A lot of it came from the Bible. But we gathered these ideas to ourselves, and with those ideas, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator. In other words, you didn't purchase these rights. You didn't have to ask for them. It didn't cost you anything. You don't have to do anything to get them. They are yours because you're a human being, a free-thinking human being. And once again, whether you're a Christian or not, follow this as a legal argument. I follow it as a religious argument myself, but if you're not a Christian, follow it as a legal argument. You are endowed by your Creator with certain inalienable rights. Why? William Blackstone said that God was the most free expression of creation in the universe. He was the freest being there was. God can go anywhere, do anything, say anything, be anything, look any way he wants, be anywhere he wants, be all places at once or no place at once. That's what God can do. And in Blackstone's treatise on law, he also said that, and the Bible tells us this too, that you were created in God's image. So once again, whether you're a Christian or not, follow this as a legal argument. If you were in fact created in God's image legally, I believe that morally as well, but you may not. But legally, if you were created in God's image, then you have certain freedoms that were placed in you by your Creator. And those freedoms cannot be abridged. Who can go to God and say, you can't do that? What are you doing giving her these freedoms? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you give them all to him and make her work harder for him? Because we are all created in our God's image. And as such, we are endowed with certain inalienable rights. And even in the Mayflower Compact, they reiterated those rights. Life, liberty, property. Benjamin Franklin said, liberty cannot exist unless property is secure. How can you be free? How can you have liberty unless you know from one day to the next what you own, what you're allowed to keep, how you're allowed to use those things? If those rules aren't stated well in advance, what good do they do you? If you wake up in the morning and the rules have changed last night, oh my God, I woke up this morning and gas was 20 cents more a gallon because the state of California, Mark Kent just pointed this out to me, in violation of Article 10, Section 1, Clause 3, first Jerry Brown went to China and signed an agreement in violation of his oath of office, the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California, and he made an agreement with a foreign power without the consent of Congress. He went to Quebec yesterday and did the same thing. He made an agreement with a foreign power without the consent of Congress. That is not rule of law, ladies and gentlemen. It's not. Amen. Personal opinion. So, at any rate, we have these freedoms. We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments were instituted among men. There we go. There's proof. The ideas placed in us at our creation were the very ideas we used to form this nation. And how many people think the Constitution is our founding document? Raise your hand. It's not a test. Okay. It's not. The Declaration of Independence is our founding document. The Constitution is our second try. Because the Constitution says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, not a union, a more perfect union. We did it once, it didn't work, we did it again. Why? How could we do that? Because governments were instituted among men, and all just power is derived from the consent of the governed. And when government fails to serve the governed, it is their right and their responsibility to abolish or reform that government as the public good demands it. Article 2, Section 1 of the California Constitution. All just power is derived from the people, not the government. Government has no power unless they derive that power with your consent. Do you consent to Jerry Brown passing laws that he doesn't have to live with that you do? Would any thinking, reasoning human being do that? I can't imagine. I imagine there are some, but so here we come to Jefferson as an idea. Jefferson is an idea that was created in the North State almost at the inception of the state of California. In fact, it was actually the first attempt to break California up was President Polk, who said California's too damn big to govern. But he died before he could do anything about it, much to our chagrin. And here we are now. We've come to a place where California is ungovernable. It's broken. It's irretrievably broken. It's broken beyond repair, in our opinion. And this is our idea. And we have the right and the jurisdiction to express it and to make that idea real. And no one can stop us. And in the Constitution, it tells us with Article 9, the 9th and 10th Amendment, that powers enumerated in the Constitution will not be used to, deny other powers to the people. So you can't even use the Constitution in order to stop people. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And what is our first right? Our first right, the right of rebellion. It's not in the Constitution, it's in the Declaration of Independence. We have the right to alter or abolish government and to institute government more suited to our needs. That's our founding document. Now, we've forgotten a lot of this stuff. That's why we're here today. I learn something from you guys every time I come here. Somebody comes up to me and says, did you know? And I go, no, I had no idea. So let's learn from each other and take these things and make this happen. Article 4, Section 3 is the jurisdiction we have to form a new state. We have an unfortunate problem in California. We have no representation. So even though we had 21 declarations that we provided to the California legislature to show our displeasure, they would not even give us a hearing. Not a fair hearing, not an unfair hearing, not a hearing at all. We sent tens of thousands of phone calls, tens of thousands of letters, tens of thousands of personal visits. We've had people that were told by their so-called representative, I don't have face-to-face meetings with my constituents. Can you imagine that? Well, I'll tell you, I wish I was there for that one. That would have been fun. But someone actually said that, a state senator, I don't have meetings with my constituents. Why? Because he doesn't care what you think. Why doesn't he care? Why, after what I've read, and what we know, why, after Thomas Paine and Common Sense said the first legislature will be held under an oak tree, everybody shows up, and we all talk about what we want. And then later, as population grows, we might have to elect people to speak for us so that we can be free to live our lives while we entrust certain liberties to our representatives in order to join civil discourse and form a society. We voluntarily did that. No one made us. We join society voluntarily. And when we do that, we delegate certain authority to the people who are supposed to represent us. And then Thomas went on to say, as the colony grows, we'll have to have a bigger building, basically. We're going to need more representatives, because as population grows, we need more representation so that every part of the colony can have its will expressed. Now, he didn't say, so every part of the colony will get their way. Right? That's not what he said. But he said have their will expressed and at least have fair hearing, whether you get your way or not. Now, here's the thing with getting your way. The majority gets its way. That's how this worked, right? But the majority can never trespass into certain areas of the compact. And those are the inalienable rights. Those are the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights was put in the Constitution for a reason. The Constitution, the convention of a number of states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. In other words, yeah, we have this Constitution, but the Anti-Federalists said, yeah, that's all great, but we don't trust you. And in succeeding generations, no one will have to trust you, because the Bill of Rights will never be tread upon. That's why they call the Bill of Rights the negative rights. There was a recent survey, and I think it was a Pew deal, and they found out that 73% of United States citizens could not name all 5 protections in the First Amendment. 33% of the people couldn't name any of them. If you don't know the rules, folks, how do you know when they're being stepped on? And once again, this isn't a test, but there are 5 protections in the First Amendment, 5 of them. And they're very important. And the Bill of Rights is called the negative rights. Why are they the negative rights? Congress shall make no law. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Shall not. No law. Cannot. Will not. That elevates decisions over the inalienable rights above policy. Government has no jurisdiction within those rights. Well, if all that's true, what in the heck are we doing here? Yeah. I mean, you know, because we've all been asleep. We haven't paid attention, and we have not forced the government that serves us to behave as outlined in the compact which we created in order to create them. In the state of California was born as an idea in the hearts and minds of men, and I can prove that too. We, the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom that to secure and perpetuate its blessings, we established this Constitution. The Constitution didn't write itself. The state didn't come before the people came before the state. In this nation, unique to all nations on earth, the people came before the law. We created law. We created the ideals. We created the ideals that all men are equal. And that's equal opportunity, not equal outcome, by the way. Nobody's guaranteed free stuff. You're guaranteed the right to try, and you're guaranteed the right to fail in that try. But you're guaranteed the right to try again until you get it right. Well, anyway, now we have a situation where the state of California is not behaving according to its compact. And by the way, one of the things that protects us from misbehavior of government is how difficult the contract is to change. The federal Constitution's been amended, if you don't count the first 10, it's been amended 17 times in over 230-something years. 17 times. Yeah, and even one of those they thought better of later and said, this isn't a good idea. Let's go back on this one. And it's very difficult to change for a reason, because the Constitution was not meant to protect us from the internet. It wasn't meant to protect us from Google or Facebook. It was meant to protect us from the good intention of well-meaning tyrants. The Constitution was meant to protect us from human nature, and human nature what? Never changes, right? It never changes. Evil men desire power. And they desire absolute power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the Constitution was designed to protect us from evil men with bad intentions, or even benevolent men with good intentions. They mean to govern, but they mean to govern you. And you will submit. That's what we're fighting against. So in the state of California, the Constitution has been amended 524 times in 164 years. 524 times. A bum in the road can change the California Constitution. A guy with more than one dog can change the California Constitution. Anybody can change it, and they can change it easily, and it has been changed. In fact, I don't even recognize it. Did you know there's a committee in Sacramento that can change the Constitution right now without telling anybody? They've been there about 20 years. The California Constitution is over 100,000 words. E. Dodson Wilson said it's everything a Constitution ought not to be. It's the joke of the legal world, actually, the California Constitution. Somebody asked me what Article 2 was the other day. And I said, well, Article 2, Section 1 is all just powers derived by the people. And he said, well, what's Article 3, or Article 2, Section 2? And I said, I've read it, but it's something about freedom of the press and reporters protecting their sources. And if you work for a magazine, not a newspaper or a television station on odd Fridays, then you don't have to reveal your source if this happens, but you do have to reveal it if that happens. It's the most ridiculous thing you ever read. And you know, it's funny, but you know what that caused? It caused a situation where nobody in government's ever read it. I've taken the oath of office 3 times in my life. Once to the United States military and twice in California. And I got to tell you, even the oath of office has changed without the benefit of a constitutional amendment. It used to be, I swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, and I enter this compact willingly without any reservation, mental reservation, blah, 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 blah. Now it's, I affirm. I don't swear anymore, I just affirm it. That's like, I affirm I won't run that red light unless nobody's looking. But if I swear I won't run a red light, I won't run it. But if all I'm doing is affirming, yes, I'd like cheese on my hamburger, I affirm that. I'll affirm that publicly. I'm not scared. I like cheese. But if I swear never to eat a cheeseburger again, that's big. And that's a change in the California Constitution, and nobody passed a law, it just changed. It changed because it's really wrong, you know. Gosh, you really want to make people swear stuff? You know, can't we just affirm it instead? Isn't that just better and kind of more touchy-feely? I like affirming. I don't really want to swear, because if I swear, I have to keep my word. And if I affirm, there might be a little wiggle room in that. So that's what's wrong with the California Constitution. That's why we're here. We can't live with this anymore. And we have no representation. Why not? Because they don't care what you think. Why would they? If a state senator's district has 1 million people in it. Now, when the men who wrote the California Constitution instituted the idea that they called government, one state senator represented 6,000 people. And one state assemblyman represented 2,500. You think they cared what their voters thought? You betcha they did. Because it's not a big stretch. If you have a district that has 2,500 people in it, it's not really a big stretch for you to go out and get 1,251 of your best friends to vote a guy out of office. You know, let's say your representative only represented one person, you. Your vote could get him in or out, just yours. Do you think he'd care what you thought? Yeah. Do you think he'd care what you thought more than Standard Oil? Yeah, because he wouldn't be in office to take the bribe if you don't vote for him. He would care about your vote more than he'd care about the money. He'd have to, because he wants that job. Okay, let's just go down this road a little bit logically. What if 10 people could elect a state senator? Would he care what you thought? You betcha he would. Not a big stretch to get 6 people to change your vote. What about 1,000? Same, not too big a stretch, getting bigger, but not too big. Let's go to New Hampshire, 3,720 people. Not a very big stretch. They get rid of incumbents all the time in New Hampshire. Why? Because a political campaign costs $1,000. Fill your car with gas and go knock on 1,500 or 1,600 doors and try to convince people that you're the guy. And you can do it. But you have to care what they think, because if you don't, it's not a big stretch for somebody else to get that same $1,000 and go do the same thing you did. In California, 99% of the time, the incumbent never loses his job. Never, ever. Why? It costs too much money. Who's going to run? Jefferson put up a candidate for state senate, and man, Steve and Diana busted their behinds. They drove tens of thousands of miles. But you know what one of the problems was? In Los Angeles, a state senator who represents 1 million people there, he pays 1 filing fee. In Jefferson, the state senator in District 1 pays 1 filing fee, and then he has to go to 11 counties and pay a naming fee, because Steve's from like Placerville or Placer County. No one knows his name in Siskiyou County, so he had to go pay for a naming statement in Siskiyou County, $3,000. Couple thousand in Lassen County. Well, and that's, I mean, I'm not saying that charge is invalid, because that's what it costs the county recorder to print the ballot with, my name is Steve Barrett, I'm a small business owner, I want to run on fair elections and good stuff for everybody. 2 dogs in every house. But you've got to do that, because no one will know you. And if you don't do it, they just vote for the D or vote for the R, no matter who you are. And believe me, the D and the R are getting kind of interchangeable here in California. Doesn't much matter. So it costs too much money, and challengers can't make that kind of money. Now, who's paying the incumbent? Who do you think? California Nurses Association, California Teachers Association, SEIU, CalPERS, CalSTRS. CalPERS is the largest economic entity in the world, really, for all intents and purposes. They have money, folks. If they want you to be elected, they can write a check. And guess what? It's your money anyway. It's your tax money. That's your tax dollars at work. So we are literally owned by the politicians who are supposed to serve us now. They exempt themselves from laws. They don't pay attention to the electorate. They don't care what you think. Your vote's irrelevant. Doesn't matter whether you vote or not. In fact, it doesn't even matter whether that guy shows up to vote or not. That's where we are now, and that's what we want to fix. So we got the declarations. We were ignored because we don't have representation, so we sued them. And now we're in court. The judge in the last go-around, she was not inclined, this is kind of funny language, she was not inclined to entertain the state's motion to dismiss. I'm kind of like, is that a yes or a no? You know, but look at it this way. We are just people. We've been doing this $2 at a time. We have sued the most powerful political entity in the United States of America, and we made it past the first hurdle. I am thrilled, thankful, and amazed, and I thank God every day for that success. We're in the fight. And you know what you got to be to win a fight? You got to be in it, right? And we are still in this fight. So the judge was supposed to announce, and here's what she said. She said, I have questions about subject matter jurisdiction. These are interesting questions, right? Because they're not here. None of that's here. Article 3 gives the court the power over all, the federal courts, the power over all matters of equity and law arising under the Constitution, not over it. So when you sue the government for misbehavior, that is our right under Article 2, Section 1. That is our right to peaceful rebellion, isn't it? All just powers derived from the people. Government was instituted for their good. It is their right to alter or reform government whenever the public good demands it. Okay, so let's ask ourselves a question. Yeah, we have that right. I can show it to you in the California Constitution. I can show it to you right here in the Declaration of Independence. But how do we exercise that right? We don't get out the musket, because we'd have the musket out all the time, wouldn't we? I mean, there wouldn't be enough bullets on earth. We'd have the musket out so often. Court is the way that we revolt. You can't revolt through the legislature because they don't care what you want. They don't have to listen to you. We've already proven that. So we revolt first in court. That's the legal, ethical, honorable way to revolt against the government. Okay, we've got a big problem here. Edmund Coke said all courts are corrupt, and he said this in 1620. You know, I mean, there's that darn history thing again. It keeps coming back. And he said it because judges know who pay them. Whether they're bad people or good people, they know where their pay comes from. Well, you can't bite the hand that feeds you too many times before the hand gets rid of you. Now, we were talking about the king. But in an oligarchy, is there any difference? We're supposed to have constitutional republic here, but we don't, do we? Because no one cares what we think. Our representatives aren't afraid of us. They want us to be afraid of them. So in an oligarchy, that's the same as a monarchy. It's one step removed. It's about the same. And so if we challenge the oligarchy, they're saying, oh, we don't care what you want. It's not going to win. And we'll just tell the judge, dismiss the case. But judges are corrupt. You know, they know who pay them. But every once in a while, if your case is, you know, people rarely win against the state. That's why we didn't sue in state court. People never win against the state in state court because that judge knows exactly who pays them, Jerry and the gang. We sued in federal court because we'd have hope there. Hope springs eternal, right? I mean, the world was built on hope, isn't it? So when we came to this judge, we presented our case, and she panicked. She panicked right away. I mean, the state's attorney was interesting. I've never read a more lazy paper than what the state's attorney wrote. Now, I'm not an attorney, and I recognize this was very poor jurisprudence, very poor literature, in fact. I mean, and what he said was, here's the state's argument. Yeah, you probably don't have enough representation, but since everybody's screwed equally, there's nothing the court can do about it. I call that the two wrongs make a right argument. And then the state's attorney also said, according to a case, and I forget the name of the case, he said that this is a political question and courts aren't allowed to settle political questions. And we laughed. We said, well, courts settle political questions all the time. In fact, the court created the political question that got us here to begin with, Reynolds versus Sims, right? Because the court in Reynolds versus Sims said, oh, first of all, it goes back a few cases to Baker versus Carr, and the court in Baker versus Carr said that federal courts will have jurisdiction over state election processes. Uh-oh, that's not anywhere in here. Oh my God, I could not believe that. In fact, in the Declaration of Independence, it said, we, the former colonies, now independent states, equal to any state in the world. Any state in the world. Do you think that states equal to any state in the world, England, France, Portugal, the bigs, Russia, the bigs of the day. Do you think that states that were equal to any state in the world would acquiesce their sovereignty to some pipsqueak that said, we're going to tell you how to elect people in your state? I can't imagine that, and it's not in here. So the court gave itself the power over the state's election process in Baker. And guess what? The people of the states, there wasn't a whisper, not a whimper. Well, 30 court challenges later, there came a case, Gray versus Sanders, and then Westerbury versus Sanders. And in that, Earl Warren, governor of California, never read the California Constitution, never read the United States Constitution, I'd swear money on it. And he said that, you know, we're going to correct all of the factual inaccuracies of Baker with Gray. In other words, we didn't get enough in Baker. So we're going to do this right in the Gray case. And he said, not only will the federal court intervene in all election processes within the states for state-level officers, but we're also going to create a principle called one man, one vote. In other words, no state election will allowed to be held on the basis of county, no statewide officer. Well, in California, we had this little problem here that Earl Warren knew about because he was the governor of California, for God's sakes, and he was the attorney general of California, and that was called Prop 28, where each county had a state senator. And you know when the last time California worked? 1964, right up until Reynolds. We had less than $5 billion worth of long-term debt. We had a state where there was infrastructure and economy was growing and people were happy. It was the greatest state in the union. And by 1980, our debt had grown to about 20% of our gross domestic product. I mean, from 1965 on, you can see that debt line go straight up. Why? Because the court created a principle where counties, large and small, weren't represented. And you know what Warren said? Well, counties don't deserve equal representation because they're not legal subdivisions of the state. They're just political arms of the state. We never read the California Constitution because Article 11, Section 1 says counties are legal subdivisions of the state. But this was an Alabama case, and he wasn't thinking about all the states. He just did something that affected all the states. So now we have that case that says one man, one vote. In other words, every statewide election will be conducted by general consensus. Okay. So then we go on, and something like 20 or 30 court challenges later, because Warren did not succeed in Westerbury and Gray, he said, okay, I am going to put a nail in this box forever. And in Reynolds versus Sims, he said, the federal court will have jurisdiction and all states will run their election apportionment under federal court supervision. In other words, we must approve your plan before you execute it. And that was the end of state sovereignty, ladies and gentlemen, forever and ever, unless we succeed. If we succeed, we can restore something that's very, very important: personal liberty and state sovereignty. Why do we care about state sovereignty? What's the big deal? State sovereignty is very important because that's where our state will stand between us and the next big fish on the block when they come to take our stuff, meaning our liberty. That's what state sovereignty represents, and it's very important. We have to be a little bit careful because California wants state sovereignty. They want state sovereignty to give all your money so that the Chinese can continue to pollute. They want your state sovereignty so that people in Quebec can continue to strip mine, and you'll pay the taxes on it, the carbon credits. I mean, so state sovereignty is a two-edged sword. You can't have crazy people and state sovereignty. So what we want state sovereignty, we just want the crazy people to go away. And we want liberty to re-enter the picture. That's what the state of Jefferson represents. How do we do that? Representation. If we had representation much akin to what the founders of this state put in place, you would have people that you elect that would have to care what you think, because you could get rid of the bum if he didn't. You could elect someone else and it wouldn't be a big stretch and it wouldn't cost a lot of money. We want to suck the money out of the politics with smaller districts. Now, someone at Sacramento Bee said, oh, your answer to California's government is bigger government. I said, no. And they said, well, yeah, you want more representatives. That's bigger government. And I said, okay, well, according to your arithmetic, smaller government would be like Cuba, where there's no representation. So we don't want bigger government. We want adequate representation so that we can make representatives do their jobs and end up with smaller government. In other words, why do we need 120 legislators and 15,000 staffers? Let's just have 10,000 legislators and no staffers. And everybody answers their own phone. Why do we need to pay legislators $200,000 a year? Because they're celebrities. They're in the King's Club. They're in the oligarchy. If we had one state senator for every 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't care, 10,000 people, they wouldn't get 200 grand a year. They wouldn't be worth that much. In fact, when California went to a full-time legislature, that was a doom for us. That was 1965 or 6, I think. We actually had a prayer before then because these people had to go home and work normal jobs. They knew how you lived because they lived with you and they lived like you, and they don't now. That's what Jefferson represents. So where are we with the court case? The court case is, we passed the first hurdle, as I said, and the judge has said she has subject matter jurisdiction questions. In other words, do we have Article 3 standing? We can prove that we do because in the Baker case, the only people who weren't challenged on standing were the 3 individuals from Indiana. All of the governmental agencies got challenged on standing in Baker. There were only 3 people out of like 41 plaintiffs in that case that weren't challenged, and those were the individual voters. The fact that you can vote gives you standing. Citizens United versus House of Representatives. You have a material interest to maintain the value of your vote. The fact that you're a voter gives you standing. In the Abbott versus Evenwell case, one of the justices says, well, who speaks for the children? You can guess who that was, probably Sotomayor, right? But who will speak for the children, the children? And Evenwell's attorney said their parents. You know, they're not voters. Children aren't voters. Their parents will speak for them until they're of voting age, and then they will speak for themselves through the representative voting process. That's what we're trying to regain, folks. Now, Abbott versus Evenwell did not succeed. They blew the case, and we know why. And we've talked to their attorneys, and they know why. But what happened in that case was miraculous for us, because our attorneys are playing both sides of that. One thing that Ginsburg said, and Sotomayor affirmed, is that representatives are responsible to represent everyone in their district. Well, are they representing you when they won't return a phone call and you can't talk to them and they don't have face-to-face meetings with you? And the attorney says, can you prove that? And I said, Scott, we can put 10,000 people on the stand, one at a time, and you ask them, have you ever tried to phone your representative? And you say yes. Did he answer the phone? No. Did you ever get to talk to him? No. Did he return your call? No. Has he ever returned your email? Well, form letter, but not personally. Did you ever have your concerns addressed? No. That's not adequately representing your constituents, is it? So we have the standing, we can prove that. So the subject matter jurisdiction is not a problem. Is it a political issue? Yes, it is. But we can also prove that courts settle political issues all the time. Okay, and then the third benchmark that the state wants answered, and therefore the judge wants answered, right, because she knows who pays her too, is that this is not justicatable. In other words, yes, you have no representation. Yes, you're totally screwed. Yes, maybe we can answer a political question, but how can we answer it? What are benchmarks? In other words, you know, what we're saying to them, here's the question, and this is another good thing that the state hasn't argued against. We're saying one person can't represent 1 million people and do a good job. Can't do it. It's impossible. The state has never said, yes, he can. They've never said that. None of their arguments, we're saying we don't have enough representation. The state has never once said, yes, you do. Guess what happens when we get to the Supreme Court? If they don't make that argument now, they lose the right to make the argument. Because you cannot argue something on appeal that you did not argue during the merits of the case. You can only argue the technicalities. They've never made that argument. Their opposition to our complaint does not make that argument. In fact, their argument is, yes, but you're all screwed equally. So what are our benchmarks? And here's the easy part. Well, when California was founded, We had one state senator for 6,000 people and one assemblyman for 2,500 people, and it stayed that way for over 15 years. What's another benchmark? George Washington said 1 for 30,000 is democracy, 1 for 40,000 is tyranny. What's another benchmark? We have 50 states, and we have a chart that has representation by state. California is the worst out of all 50. We're number 50. One state senator for 1 million, one assembly person for 500,000. Texas is number 2, and they're way up there, like 1 for 200,000 or 300,000 and one assembly for 150,000. So why don't we say, okay, here's a benchmark, national average, which would be about 1 for, I don't know, 50,000 in the Senate and 1 for 25 in the assembly. That's a benchmark. We can come up with benchmarks all day long. So we have benchmarks, we have jurisdiction, we have subject matter jurisdiction, we can solve the political question. We're rewriting the complaint right now. Here's an interesting thing. The court was supposed to rule and give us an order. The judge said, I want some questions answered, and I will issue an order as to what those questions are. Now think about that. This judge is afraid. She's afraid. She's afraid if she dismisses this out of hand, that we might have to go to option number 2 in the right of revolution, you know? And she's afraid at the same time that if she dismisses this case out of hand, because this judge is a Democrat, an Obama appointee, worked in the city council of Sacramento, worked for Darrell Steinberg, she's afraid if she doesn't dismiss it, her political buddies will be really mad at her. So she's sitting on a razor, and she'd like to figure a way out of this. Now, what's the logical way out of it? You can't really dismiss the case because all the stuff we're saying is true and we can prove it. The way for her to get out of it is assign this to a 3-judge court, because then it won't be her making whatever decision is made, not solely her. Her Democratic buddies can't get mad at her, and on the other hand, we won't be mad at her because that's what we want. What does a 3-judge court do for us? Title 28, Section 2284A says that any action over lack of representation, dilution of vote, the federal magistrate must request a 3-judge court. And 2284, I think B2 or something, I can't remember the number, says any action resulting from a 3-judge court, primary jurisdiction for the appeal is the United States Supreme Court. So even if she asks for the 3-judge court, okay, and even if the 3-judge court says, oh, get out of here, case dismissed, we still appeal to the Supreme Court. We are going to the Supreme Court the minute she says 3-judge court in a sentence. So here's our gift. She said she has questions about subject matter jurisdiction and Article 3 standing. And she's going to tell us exactly what those questions are ahead of time in her order. And then we'll have a month to do the legal research, get the historians, the statisticians, and answer those questions sufficiently so that she has to find merit with the case. Well, why can't she just say, well, you know, I really don't want to suffer this politically. I'm going to dismiss this no matter what they say. Why can't she do that? Because in McManus versus Shapiro, Antonin Scalia, oh God, I love that man. I am so sorry to see him pass. He said federal courts will not have the latitude to dismiss a lack of representation case on merit. He said it is impossible for one judge to rule on that merit. They must only dismiss if they can prove that there is settled law in the Supreme Court to say that this ground cannot be retread. There has never been a case like ours. There is no precedent. The state has never cited one single Supreme Court case that addresses the question we're asking right now, and they can't because there isn't one. So theoretically, she can't dismiss the case. We think she knows that. We think her clerks are doing a ton of legal research to try to find that crack in the door that the puppy could wiggle through before he gets a whipping for peeing on the carpet. But we will have those questions and we can answer them. We've already answered most of them. Not to the state's attorney's satisfaction, though. In fact, the judge asked the state's attorney in open court, well, look, what if I found the level of representation, I can't even say this without laughing, what if I found the level of representation in California to be inadequate, unconstitutional? What then? The state's attorney says, well, Your Honor, I never really thought about it. Well, I have to say, are you surprised that he holds you in that much contempt? I find it funny, but I'm not surprised. That's exactly the kind of answer I would expect the state of California to give to the people who created this government to serve them. And they affirmed they'd serve you. They just didn't really mean it. So we're going to make them. And that's it. That's really it in a nutshell. Well, the judge has not issued the order. She should have already. Courts are under no obligation. There's no timeline, no calendar. You can't make them. She'll do it whenever she's damn good and ready, and we'll be prepared whenever that day comes. But so I just want to close by saying that, Patrick Henry is a real favorite of mine, and he was talking to some guys in the Virginia legislature, and he was asking them, what would gentlemen have? In other words, what in a perfect world, how would you like your life to be ordered? What do you want? What is it you want? You hear guns to the north. You know the people around us are fighting. Look to the south. See what's coming out of there. You can't drive a diesel truck. They're taxing your tap water. You pay $1 more a gallon for every drink of water you take. You pay a tax on every drink of water you take now out of your own tap. You pay $1 a gallon more for gas than anybody in the United States does. Well, I know Oregon's catching up, but still. You have a governor that disobeys the Constitution at will and with impunity because nobody will stop him. And I wrote letters to the state's Attorney General, the United States Attorney General, and I said, the governor of California is in violation of Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, and he's also in violation of Article 2 of the California Constitution, or Article 3, which says California is an inseparable part of the Union and the United States Constitution is the law of the land. He doesn't care. Do something about that. I never even got a response. Because this oligarchy stretches far and wide, ladies and gentlemen. What I propose in the state of Jefferson is that we create a corner of the United States of America where liberty is important and where constitutional republic takes precedence over all things. Why? Because it works. And I've been to every socialist crap hole on earth. And I can tell you right now that tens, if not hundreds of millions of people have suffered and died under socialist forms of government. Constitutional republic works, and we need it. We need it desperately. We need our liberty. I refuse to die a slave. I won't. And George Washington said the difference between the American Christian and anybody else on earth is that the American would rather die on his feet than live on his knees. And Patrick Henry asked his buddies, what would you have? And they all said safety. We want safety. We want to be safe. We want to be at peace. That's not a bad thing. I mean, those guys weren't bad guys. They were just scared. But he looked right at them and he says, is life so sweet or peace so dear to be purchased at the price of slavery and chains? Is it? That's a question everybody in this room needs to ask because it may come to that in the end. And he had an answer. Almighty God forbid it, for I know not what course others may take. As for me, give me liberty or give me death. And at the end of the document that founded this nation, the people in that room pledged their lives, their treasure, and their sacred honor to do the one job that the Constitution of the United States gives to each and every one of you. We just one. You don't have to stay awake. You don't have to read a book a week. All you have to do is secure liberty for your posterity. Do we owe our children at least that much? Do we owe them at least the same level of liberty that we enjoyed? Oh, I mean, if we could engineer it, better would be good, but God, if we could just leave it the same as we got it, I'd be okay with that. So that's your thought for the day. What's my line in the sand? What am I willing to do to secure liberty for my children and my grandchildren? If it's just a few bucks, yeah, that's easy. If it's showing up, I can do that. If it's driving, even when the football game's on, I don't like football, so I can do that. I like it a lot less since everybody kneels at the start of the game. But do you see where I'm going? Do you have a line? Do you have a personal line? Is there some place in your heart where you will not allow the government to tread? Because I assure you, the government of California already has a plan to tread there if they're not already. I do. Thank you very much. Yes, I'd be happy to. This is really the embarrassing part. Everybody sit down.
We can take some Q&A now, and what we'll do is please wait again for the microphone to get to you because we're recording this. And Garrett will be here in the middle. Wynn is over there, and I'll take this side over here. So whenever you guys are ready, if you have a question, we'll take a few. Who has a question?
See you later, guys. Clayton, I look forward to stabbing you at a future battle. Since I'm an old guy now, my wife told me no more falling off the horse. When I take my hit now, I have to slide off the side like a sissy and then, drag myself over to the edge of the battlefield. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
My name is Pat. I want to know how long the judge can put off
Forever.
making any decision.
Forever.
She doesn't have to respond to
No
us
rule.
at all.
I know a guy, Charles Nichols, bless his heart. We all ought to be thanking this guy with every fiber of our being, and I send him money, by the way. He has the case Nichols versus Brown, where he sued Governor Brown over the open carry of either loaded or unloaded weapons in the state of California. And his suit's been in court for like 7.5 years.
So do we have a recourse to come back and
No.
demand anything?
No. Well, you know what our recourse is? Public pressure. Our recourse is public pressure. The more we get in the news, the more waves we make, the more phone calls we make to legislators like that liar and crook Anthony Rendon or Kevin De Leon or Governor Brown, the more presence and the more drama. Because look, here's the thing: court is drama. Court is theater, right? And the more drama and the more public pressure we bring to court, that can sway a judge's opinion. We did really well at the last hearing. I'm so proud of the people of Jefferson because we made it past that first hurdle. And she will have to rule. I do expect it in the next week or two. It should have been within 1 week. So 3 weeks is kind of, it is indicative of, I think, the judicial paranoia that might be occurring right now. And the political pressure on that judge has got to be immense. I mean, you figure they have got to be leaning on her in some way. So we'll get the order soon. I don't think she can put us off forever. I don't think that would work for them because we'll go to Plan B or Plan C or something else and we'll get what we need. But no, there is no rule. And quite frankly, in this part of it, I'm okay with it because the more research she does, the more legally oriented her questions will be, and the easier it will be for us to prove our point. So I think this particular part is not a bad thing. And when we get that 3-judge panel, we're going to have a barbecue because that means we're going to the Supreme Court.
Woo! Okay, Mark, over to your left. To your left.
Hi, thank you. My name is Michelle. Thank you again for all that you've done for us really here in the state of California. I just want to put a shout out to Pat over there that there are things that we can do. People that are praying people. I'm going to tell you I know
Amen,
the power
sister.
of prayer. Let me tell you, if God is on our side, God said, if there's no one that can stand against us, as God is with us, there's no one. There is no one or no thing.
Amen.
So we just stand on the Word of God and we pray for open doors. And I have numerous of miracles and things that I can, and that's why I believe. So if the people that can pray will pray and continue to pray and ask God and the Holy Spirit to go before and convict the people that are going to hear the statutes and everything, the judges and everything, and the Lord will open those doors miraculously. I don't care what comes against you and says no. You keep banging on that door. You keep banging on that door.
Thank you for saying that. I really mean that. I was going down the road with Tom Pease. Some of you guys know Tom. He's the guy that my wife makes drive me places. I hate to have yeah. It's really embarrassing. But sometimes when it's really far, she makes people drive me. Like I can't. I'm a DC-10 captain, right? I've driven myself all over the world like 1,000,000 times. She doesn't trust me to drive up to Plumas County all by myself. So anyway, but Tom, I was kind of grousing about something to do with Jefferson, and we were in the car, and Tom looks at me and he goes, obstinate. And Tom looks at me, he says, you know what your problem is? And I said, no, Tom, what's my problem? He says, you don't have any faith. And I went, uh-oh. I said, oh, you got me on that one, didn't you? So let's have some faith.
Amen.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Wait for the microphone.
How is the Cal exit going, and how would that affect what we're trying to do?
Well, that's a real dilemma for us, Cal exit, right, by the way, because if any official, any state level official within the government of the state of California supports Cal exit in any public way or makes even an ineffectual attempt at conspiracy, in other words, makes even an ineffectual attempt to see Cal exit succeed, then we will apply directly to the United States Congress for an Article 4, Section 3 state split, because we in Jefferson have no wish to be insurrectionist. We want to add a star to the flag, not take a star away. So a la West Virginia versus Virginia, when Virginia voted for secession from the United States of America, the newly constituted legislature of the state of West Virginia, and it was constituted in about a day, maybe a day and a half, applied directly to the United States Congress. Now they felt no longer obligated to apply to their own state legislature as Article 4 demands, because their own state was involved in insurrection. So they applied directly to Congress, and it took a couple of years, but Congress finally approved their application as a state. And by the way, as we all know, once the Civil War was over, West Virginia did not go back to Virginia. They remained a state. So we would apply to Congress for statehood immediately. And I've already had conversations with legislators in Washington, D.C. who would introduce our legislation. So if California moves to secede, we separate immediately. Now, here's the dilemma. If Cal exit makes it to the ballot, do we vote for it to help them? Or do we vote against it because it's wrong? I asked that question in all seriousness. I mean, we can help them get us a state, but we can say no because we think it's wrong. I'll leave that one up to you. Does that answer your question? You're welcome.
Hey,
Yes.
Mark.
Hey,
Forgive me for this because I haven't versed it in a while.
don't ask me any really hard questions again, okay?
Oh, I'll try not to.
Yeah.
Is it not the fifth that guarantees you a fair and speedy trial?
Yep.
So there it is. And what part of that? They say 7 years is too much.
Well, because that doesn't apply to civil cases, it applies to criminal cases. And there's a lot of precedence for that. You know, it's funny. It's like the Fourth Amendment, your guarantee, and you don't have the right to privacy, by the way, in the Constitution. You have the right to be secure in your persons and papers and so on. That doesn't apply from person to person. That applies between government and people. So once again, we're suing a governmental entity, and so the fifth doesn't apply with regard to speedy trial because it's not a criminal trial.
Well, you're going to have to talk to the attorneys and see how you can wiggle in that criminal side of it, because they're criminals. They're stealing everything we got.
See there, if we could get the United States Attorney General to charge Jerry Brown for willfully violating his oath of office, the Constitution of the state and the United States, yeah, maybe we'd have something there, huh? But right now, no. It's a civil case, and there is no limit on the time.
I should have asked you a
And
harder
another
question.
thing about federal courts is local rules of procedure are really interesting, and they're different from court to court. What is okay in one court isn't okay in another court. So you might get to a court that has time limits, but the Eastern District in Sacramento doesn't. We'll get the ruling though. I'm not really worried about that. I think we'll get the ruling, and our attorneys are convinced we're going to get the 3-judge court too. So,
Well, if they got
yeah.
it, then we've got it.
Oh yeah,
So-
that's right. Yeah,
I was just wondering if you knew the answer to that one too.
yeah.
Okay, my name is Joe, and I'm going to do a follow-up on the West Virginia topic you were just doing here. In fact, I had it written down there to make sure we discuss that. because since we're doing this sanctuary state thing right now, it already seems to me like, I see your point, that they're already violating the law.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking is if we could get all of, contact all of the sheriffs, all of the boards of supervisors, et cetera, the district attorneys that are supposed to be representing the law, have them all say we're against this, and then immediately just go right and do that.
I've asked a couple of constitutional attorneys about this. I've done quite a bit of research on it and talked to a congressman about it. And here's the problem with sanctuary state. First of all, there is a federal case that says that county sheriffs cannot be compelled to enforce federal law. There's a Supreme Court case that says that. County sheriff has ultimate jurisdiction in his county within the state on behalf of the people. However, there is no precedent to say that a county sheriff cannot be compelled to enforce state law. Now, what's the recourse? Let's say a county sheriff shares information with the feds about illegal immigration anyway. What recourse does the state have? The answer, that's none, because the county sheriff is an elected official, and I know because I work for one. So if a county sheriff chooses to share that information or not share that information, there's no punishment for him because he's an elected official, and the only recourse besides criminal activity would be a recall or impeachment. And the state of California doesn't have the power to impeach a sheriff.
All right. The second question that I had.
Yeah.
All right. Is, you were talking about, playing both sides in our court case.
Yeah.
And first of all, I 100% support the court case and everything we're doing with that. But it seems like we've got some other cards we're not playing at this point in time.
Yeah, maybe.
Like in 1850, when the state of Texas became a state, okay, the federal government told them that they had the right then to form into 5 additional states. And we know the Constitution says that you can't grant to one state the power that you don't give to all. Further, then, in the Compromise of 1850, the state of California was admitted as one state now to be divided later. So, why are we not going along those, using all avenues all at the same time?
Okay, first of all, I'm not disputing what you say. I think that's great information, but I need that paperwork so that I can evaluate it and have lawyers evaluate it. So if you can get the text for that to be divided later, I'd love to see it. And the state of Texas, you can't deny something to one state that you've given to another, but here's our problem. We don't have rule of law, and that's done all the time, and we have to pick the hill we want to fight on. So if we want to chase that rabbit, we can, but we'd need a lot of documentation, a lot of history, and basically we'd have to start over. Now, mistakes were made. I mean, the people who started this, myself included, we never having split a state in half before, I'm sure we probably made a few mistakes. But in a court case, once you allege something, you can't change the allegations midstream. So, and that was the problem with Abbott versus Evenwell. And we talked to them after they'd made their allegations, and they said, holy crap, we might have blown it here. But it was too late because the complaint was already filed. So we've got to stick with the merits we have now, but I would love to see that paperwork because there may be a way to work it in later. Okay.
Mark, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming and giving us all this good information. You're invaluable as to what we really know. I had a question. One of the meetings I went to, they talked about Oregon becoming part of our effort to separate and become the state of Jefferson.
Yeah.
And they said no, because Oregon was a separate state. They had to do their own thing. But I was up fishing in Gold Beach, and the state of Jefferson is all over southern Oregon.
Yeah. See, here's the thing. They don't really have to do their own thing, but in an Article 4 separation, there's a very strict process. You have to gain the approval of your state legislature, and you have to gain the approval of Congress. So we being Californians, we can gain the approval of our state legislature, and they being from Oregon, they can gain the approval of their state legislature, and then together we could go to Congress. But they have to be conducted separately because we do live in 2 separate states. Now, the way I've explained it to the folks in Oregon is that even if you're late to the table, let's say we get the state of Jefferson before you gain approval from your state legislature. Well, it's a lot easier for you to join us than it is for us to concurrently do all this stuff at exactly the same time and have it all come out right. So it doesn't matter whether they come after us or whether they get done before us. In fact, it makes it easier because there is precedent for a county in New York, or it was either New York or Vermont, that wanted to change to the other state. And there is some precedent for that. So the fact that our timeline doesn't match is irrelevant. We can still accomplish the goal, which is for all of the like-minded people of the Pacific Northwest to form a constitutional republic with districts small enough to have representation that's adequate to the people who form that government.
Great, thank you.
Good job.
Yes, sir.
I think they're scared of us.
It's fun. They weren't scared of us a year ago. They might be awake. I'm going to say they're awake now. I'm not going to say they're afraid yet. When we get the three-judge court, they should be afraid, because here's the thing with that three-judge court. We could literally get a summary judgment out of them. I mean, the size of the district is so egregious in California. I could see a three-judge panel giving us a summary judgment. And now California has a dilemma. Do we appeal that to the Supreme Court and risk yanking the rug out from under every blue state on the East Coast? Or do we let that lie, and at which time we settle, create the state of Jefferson, and nobody has to do what the court made them do, except Jeffersonians can go free, and we won't risk breaking the back that the populist socialists have on the East Coast as well. So California has a problem. If Supreme Court sets precedent, every state has to listen. And that would be a big risk for a party that is struggling for relevance right now. So if we got summary judgment, now they have something to be really afraid of.
I'm a member of the NRA, and I get a lot of emails from them telling me to send messages to those people you were talking about, especially on gun laws.
That's what Robert E. Lee called them, those people.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I don't send any of them because I know it won't do any good. They won't listen.
They don't have to. Why should they listen to you? They don't care what you think, or they don't care how you vote.
And last year's election, with that big law where we have to have the background checks on ammunition, you know
what I do?
We have no voice
laws?
when it comes to that sort of stuff.
I have the inalienable right to possess weapons for defense of myself, my family, my neighbors, my state, and my community. And as Thomas Jefferson said, gun ain't much good without a bullet. So I don't obey laws that infringe on the inalienable rights given to me by my Creator.
I'm trying to buy up ammunition so that before this stuff comes down, before I have to go through a bunch of BS that is put down on me by people who don't have any brain power whatsoever.
Well, they don't have to, and nobody holds them accountable. That's what we're trying to do. We're
these
trying to hold them
decisions shouldn't be made by people down in the cities who aren't educated, who don't know what they're thinking about.
That's the system that you live. That's the system that tyrannizes you right now. That's what we're trying to fix.
Yeah. Should be made by people like us who know what we're actually talking about.
It should at least be made so that everybody has equal representation. Thank you. I'm with you. Bulkammo.com, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, I hear you. Yes.
Hey, Mark. Thank you so much. I listen to you all the time on the State of Jefferson radio show on Sunday mornings. And recently you'd mentioned personally you're being in Siskiyou County and the onslaught of the marijuana grow, and that the National Guard had to be activated. And so it's more of a personal question in a way, but this affects all of the Jeffersonian states that are enduring another harvest. Do you care to elaborate a little bit more on that for people that may have missed the program?
Well, first of all, I personally don't have an opinion on marijuana. It's irrelevant to me who uses it and who doesn't. Okay, it's not my job to tell you what you can and can't put in your mouth. However, I do believe that communities have the right to vote about how they want to live. The people in my community voted that they didn't want any more than 6 plants. They didn't want it grown outside. They didn't want the stink, the trash. They didn't want the, the environmental damage. They didn't want any of that stuff. And I respect that because they have the ability to do that, and I respect that vote as a law enforcement officer. So, and the only help, by the way, we get from the National Guard, it's not like the tanks and stuff start going. 5 or 6 kids show up with machetes, and they help us old guys drag plants to the truck, and that's about it. So, but once again, I don't have any personal opinion about marijuana. Personally, I don't mind people who use marijuana because it makes it easier for people who don't to compete in the world. But I'm okay with that.
Hey, Mark. Mark, got a quick question for you.
Yes.
Regarding the court case that you said was going to be the basis for us to be able to what'd you say? He said it couldn't be dismissed. Couldn't be dismissed. That's what it was. Yeah. What was the court case that you were citing for that?
I think that was a Shapiro case, I believe, and it covers subject matter jurisdiction, but it's a two-edged sword, and the state is using it in one way, and that wasn't the way the case was written.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You said that Oregon would have to do their own thing.
Yeah.
And I understand that. It makes sense, unfortunately. But why would we want Oregon to join us?
Well, first of all, there are a couple of reasons, and I understand your question. First of all, can you honestly say, I deserve liberty and I want liberty, but even though you want it, you can't have it because we don't want you? I would have a hard time with that. And second of all, with history and economics and culture, we're a lot alike with the counties of Southern Oregon. There's an independent spirit. We're resource counties. The people have been in this together since 1940, and that's why.
Why wouldn't they want to be their own state?
Well, first of all, the 3 or 4 counties from Southern Oregon that might join us are too small to be a state. They wouldn't be able to provide even the basic services a state provides.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it would be hard for me to look at someone and say, I got my liberty, but you can't have yours. That would I couldn't do it.
We're going to take probably a couple more questions, and that'll we'll wrap it up. So, you got a question there, kiddo?
There's been some, I don't want to call it news because it is news, but of course it's not being reported on regular, real.
Be still my heart.
Well, honestly, it's something that hurts us.
Yeah.
There is now the CCR movement has moved into what they're calling New California.
Okay.
And I'm curious, I've read some things that some of the Jefferson leadership has put out about it. I wanted to hear a little bit from you, if you could, about what's going on there.
I believe in the Constitution. I believe in it even when it doesn't suit what I got going. I mean, people have the right to speak. They have the right to say whatever they want. I disagree with what they say, but I would defend to the death their right to say it. I think that if they want to start some kind of new state thing, go for it. It doesn't hurt us. That what it does is it expresses to the legislature that something big is wrong here. Now, we have a pathway that's years old, that we've spent tens of thousands of man hours by tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and our plan's working. So I'm going to stick with the plan myself. If somebody has a better idea and they get there quicker, please hurry before we spend the rest of the million in court, But I think that our plan is legal, it's ethical, it's moral. We followed all of the steps that you have to face in order to have standing, in order to have a real injury that a court can settle, and a pathway to stay to it, a real pathway. I don't know what they have going. It doesn't matter to me because I think what we're doing is going to work. But like I said, the more people that stir the pot, the better.
Hey.
I just had a real quick comment to add to the question that was asked of why Oregon would want to come with us. I think our state seal would look pretty silly with one X.
Yeah, yeah, there's that. Yeah, that's right. Double crossed by Sacramento and double crossed by Salem. So we need the 2 X's. Yeah, yeah. It's funny, stuff that's right under your nose. You see it so often, you kind of forget where you came from. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Mark, having taken the oath of office myself a couple of times, it says that you have to obey the Constitution.
Yeah.
Well, we know that we have a legislature in California that has basically committed treason.
Yeah, pretty
Why
much.
can't we go to the Supreme Court and say, hey, we don't want to be part of the treasonous part of the state?
You can. The answer is you can do that. But in order to do that, you have to, in other words, it's kind of like somebody said, well, let's get rid of the Federal Reserve and none of this would happen. And yeah, I'm okay with that fundamentally, but here's the thing. We got to pick the hill we want to fight on. And so we've chosen a hill where we have measurable wrong that has a measurable remedy that will lead us to where we want to be. We could sue them for that stuff, but we would have to single out an individual. We'd have to single out an act committed by that individual. We'd have to spend the money and the time and do the research to make sure that we could identify the harm that caused us. And that harm is a constitutional harm, and it's real. And then we'd have to prosecute that suit the same way we're doing this one now. And I think personally, I'm wrong all the time. I'm wrong on a daily basis. I don't think we have the money or horsepower to pursue too many avenues at once. But the answer is we could do that. We just have to choose to do it and then follow through.
Hey, Mark. My name is Todd Papish.
Hi.
It occurred to me while you were talking, and the summary judgment you were talking about that could come out of the three-judge court. What if they just said, okay, take the population of California, divide it by your benchmark, and assign that many legislators and that sort of thing? And how does that play into, or how does the state of Jefferson naturally evolve out of this case?
Well, and that's a perfect question, really, because there is no judicial way to split a state, and we all know that. There's only one constitutional way to split a state, and that's legislative. The remedy for that kind of harm is legislative. But so here's what we hope to do. We hope to establish a benchmark that is so high that the state of California will literally implode under the weight of the egos. In other words, if we were to succeed, and I'm not saying we will, but this is, and all the plaintiffs have slightly different wishes. If Glenn County chooses to join, their hope is one for 50,000 and one for 25,000. Myself and the Jefferson plaintiffs, we want one for 6,000 in the Senate and one for 2,500 in the Assembly as the benchmark that the founders of California instituted for us. And then those numbers increased as population increased until some arbitrary legislator said, no, we don't want to create any more representation. And that's literally the notes from the Constitutional Convention in 62 and 79 said that, so we can prove that. And the reason we want to do that is California would then have around 14,000 assembly people and 7,000 senators. And they're not going to want to comply with that. I mean, you can't bribe that many people. CalPERS can't own that many people. They'd have to get a new phone system. They'd have to build a new town at 15 staffers per assembly person. They'd have to build a new town that would hold 500,000 staffers. So they'd need much bigger parking lots. So what we're hoping is they will come to us behind closed doors and say, look, fellas, there's no way we can or will comply with that. What's it going to take to make you go away? And that's where we say, get your mono party to approve an Article 4, Section 3 state split. We've already been communicating with members of Congress, and we think we have a better than even chance there. It isn't a guarantee. There is no guarantee here, and you know, you've been in court a million times. There's no such thing as a guarantee. But this is the path that we think has the greatest chance of success. If we don't succeed on this path, we'll have to choose another one. And if you have any advice about that, open to it. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, Mark, over here.
I just have a little addition to Michelle's prayer. Why don't you meet me over there in the corner, and anybody that wants to join us for prayer, come on after the meeting.
All right. Thank you. Mark, I wanted to bring up that every single Sunday at 9 a.m. on KCNR 1460, we have a radio program about Jefferson every Sunday. Right behind us is Sovereign Minds that talks about all the things you won't hear in the mainstream media, and we also talk about Jefferson there. We have the attorneys on, isn't that correct, Mark? We've had the attorneys on. We
Yeah,
have
we
them
have.
on. We have Mark Baird on. So you can listen to that. Now, if you're in church on Sunday, you can always listen to the archive any day of the week you want. And the archive, I think, up to 6 months. So you always can go back and get the information from the radio program by simply going to the website. We have cards out here that we can give you to direct you on where you go. And it's a fabulous tool. And it's a great way to get your information, every Sunday, every week.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks, thank you, Mark.